Welcome back to the Moonlit Music Group channel. We're on to part 3 on how to mix drums that rock. We're going to take a look at the toms, how to generate movement, what type of panning we're going to use, how we're going to mix them in to make them bring the energy to the table that toms require. We'll consider any more level adjustments we need to make on the drums, any coats of varnish, and then we'll take a look at where we started, where we finished, and how far we've come. Let's go. Before I go bring in the toms, let's introduce a little bit of reverb, and I'll show you my thought process for reverb. So I'm going to use one of my more preferred drum reverb sounds, which is this EMT 250 short pre-delay. If your pre-delay is really big, you're going to lose a lot of that transient quality of your drums. Like if you put it like to 60, it's just going to kill the transients. And if you put it at 0, it's not going to have enough separation between the transient of the drum and the reverb to really make it cut. 20 milliseconds to me is that sweet spot. I'm not dampening any of the top end. I'm dampening a little bit of the bottom end. And I'm going to start, like I've mixed the song already, so I have this like 1.2 second reverb here. But how I find that is I just start at the lowest, and we're going to send the overheads to the reverb and turn that reverb up to unity. So you can really hear that as like wakes everything up, right? So what we're looking for out of this reverb and how we're going to time this reverb, we're not going to fucking divide the BPM by 60,000, all that bullshit. I don't mix with math. I mix with ears. So we're going to bring this decay sound up until we're hearing the sort of reverb fade out enough in between snares that when the next snare hits, we're not just building up more and more to where the last snare hit is still ringing out by the time the next snare hit comes in. And even 1.5 sounds good, but let me show you. I'm going to go up to 3 so you can hear what I mean. It's like the reverb's not even done decaying by the time it's being struck again. And that's how you get muddy, shitty reverb. Like, it's not that you can't have 3-second reverb sometimes, but you want your reverb to be decaying by the time you're striking it again, generally speaking. For vocals, a little more complicated. The principle is the same, but the sort of finesse is a little bit different. But drums is a good way to practice that concept. It's just too much, right? You can hear when I pause it, there's just too much going on. And I always follow this principle where I'm doing the overheads into the reverb and then anything else, maybe if I feel like it needs it. Sometimes toms, I did put toms in here and I am going to put them in here, but I'll do them after we treat them. And I did a little bit of that China cymbal as well, because again, it's an iconic sound. And I think just having it with the drum room being the cymbal dominant and it not really having that reverb in there, and then adding it with that China, it's just going to give it that extra little bit of juice and energy when those breakdown parts come in. Again, strategic, tasteful, clever, resourceful engineering. So we're just going to take that drum reverb now that we've maxed it out and listened to it and all that. We're just going to lift it until we really hear the interaction start, but it's not like, oh, but there's a reverb. So this point here, that's as far as I would push the reverb. That's where if you have an epic moment, a tom fill, a huge snare, a break, you want to really just be like, you want to feel the power and the arena style sound. You want to feel that space, like especially if there was like, a phrase and then a snare crack and then a break and then a jump into another part, and you want to push that reverb up there, just let that decay in space and really make it dynamic. That's where we're going to be. So that's the highest part we're going to go before it's like just annoying, right? So we know that's our ceiling. And then -9 here, that's where I kind of start to feel the reverb kind of show up. So that's where I'm going to leave it till I start to feel it, till it starts to just take that overhead recording and just take it to the next level. And then now we know we have 6 dB of space to push. It's like little notes that I write down in my head as I'm mixing things. Because one of the things we're setting ourselves up for is when we're working in the song later, when there's a breakdown or there's a bridge or there's a quiet part, you can add some reverb to make it more dynamic. You can bring the overheads up to make it a little punchier. You could turn the kick and the snare up for a breakdown to really give it that extra thing. Where is it going to sit when it's kind of in unity, when it's stationary? But reserving the room, reserving that extra place to go, that allows you, like I said, to just give you space to just, let's push the overheads a bit more for the verse, because there's more space, so we can let the drums really shine there. And then when the chorus comes out, we can duck that overhead down there and let some of the more dry drums take over because we have more guitars, we have more vocals, we have more stuff going on. It's like nothing should remain static. But it's like, if the drums were to remain static, how do we make them sound most optimal so that when we start making them less static, we have space to go, but if we left everything alone, it would still work for the whole thing? Play with the audience, give them satisfaction. And that's the crux of it. So let's bring the toms in, which I panned hard left and hard right. I like hard panning toms. I want that doo-doo happening in your head. I want that excitement. Fuck realistic. I don't give a shit. What's going to make the listener feel satisfied, feel impacted? Mix for the audience. Stop mixing for engineers. So I love using these SSLs on drums. Let's find where we got some tom action going on so we can really hear and dial in what's happening here. Cool. So there's going crazy at the end there. We got a lot of tom action so we can really kind of hear what we're doing. Normally, I would do a lot of this mixing while I'm listening in context, but I want you guys to really be able to hear what's going on here. So we're in a similar boat. It's like you're hybrid mixing this somewhat like a kick and somewhat like a snare. So I'm trying to find that body of the drum, but rather than bell it like I do the snare, I'm going to use a shelf and then bring a filter in underneath it to just tidy up the low end. So I'm going to use a bell to find where that weight is, switch it to a shelf, bring it just up a little bit because that's how shelves work, and then bring a filter in behind it. So that's where it is. Switch back to a shelf. I don't have to go crazy. Start there. Bring it up just a bit. And then bring in this. We just don't want it to be overly bassy. And then I'm going to find that mid-range, that cardboard aspect of it, and duck that out a little bit. And now I want to find the stick from the toms. Like I want some of that crack up there, and I'm probably going to do that same 8K to 10K, something in that range bell where you get like the pierce. But unlike the other drums, I want an upper mid sound as well, probably 1.5 to 2K kind of thing. Toms are special. They're momentary. They only happen. They want to be really impactful. So I want to find some activity in the mid-range that really makes it shine, and some activity in the top end that really makes it shine. So I get broadband, chunky, delicious sound. And you can hear as soon as I boost that, you get this like iconic kind of texture that you expect to get from a really, really good tom. And I'm going to be aggressive with these. I'm very aggressive with my tom EQ because it only happens for a second. So I want it to really smack and then compress it around that smackness. So I'm gonna pan the center just so it's a little bit less awkward to listen to. So let's listen to this now. Great. And now you can see where the bleed is like really kind of becoming a little bit of a problem. So I'm going to pre-dynamic this, and I'm going to do some expansion, some gating, just to get rid of that other noise and just like sort of round out the envelope of that tom. And then I'm going to do a little bit of compression just to really make it smack. So same principle here, fastest attack, fastest release, bring this range down to like 10 or something like that. We're not trying to kill the shit out of it. We don't need to duck it 40 dB. Like, it's okay if there's some bleed in there. It's actually almost better that it's not too sterile. You're trying to control it, but you're not trying to like delete it. So the goal here is to try to get the expander to react to the tom and not react to the snare. If we have to, it's totally fine. Anything that's adding more juice to the snare, totally fucking fine. So this is more just me teaching the expansion principles than anything else. And then now that we have this super tight, what we want to do is just open up that release so that when the tom's not being like choked. Like, you can hear it's being choked, like it's fading out too quickly. And this is the same principle as the reverb. You want it to be able to decay out enough so that when it snaps back, you can really feel the envelope of it happen. Expanders are great, great dynamic control, but people are just always trying to choke everything instead of just shaping things gently. And lastly, I like to compress these, same as the snare, 5-to-1 to 8-to-1, something like that in here. Let's go 5-to-1 just so we're not choking it. Fastest release. And we just want to just see that light up just a little bit when that tom hits. Just let you know you're engaging it, but you're not smashing it. We're not trying to delete things. We're just trying to like really get a little bit more snap out of it. So I'm liking that. So EQ wise, we can pretty much copy that over onto the other tom. Let's highlight a little bit and take a look at it. We want to reset this bell because the tom's a different pitch. So now we need to just hone in on that a little bit. The other aspects of it should translate no problem. It's only that fundamental meat and potatoes we got to find. We'll also have to dial in the expander and compressor in again. So let me just bypass those for now. So that sounds good to me. Sounds like what we're looking for. Again, just a little bit. And then let's bring that expander in and let's do the same thing. We can probably keep these envelope settings the same and just make sure that threshold is okay. So we don't have that problem with the snare, but now we have a problem with that China cymbal. But in the same sort of vein, I'm not really worried about it because it's something that's iconic. Anything that's adding a little bit extra fizz to it, a little bit extra this or that, I'm cool with that. It's no problem at all. Let's dial in that compressor. So to open up the release a little bit more, it's a bigger tom. It's going to have a longer ring out, and it was too choked again. And now I'm just going to remember to gain stage that. We're in a good spot with that one. So they're in a good spot. We don't need to reinvent the wheel with that. Let's hear how they sound. So same principle, we've panned them again. Now I'm just gonna lift them up into that until they're sitting with the overheads nicely. And just like we were talking about before, we started this with them at like -3 and now they're -6. So in certain climactic situations, there's room to go with the toms to make them even chunkier, but they're sitting nicely with the rest of the drums right now. And the last thing I'm going to do with those, I'm going to add a little bit of that reverb in as well. I'm just going to take that same reverb send, just so that if we have anything, a climactic fill or anything, we're bringing up that reverb, we're getting some of that tom in there as well. I think we can bring them back a little bit too. And we can bring that out a little bit, losing too much of the low end on the right side. Just working things out as we go, you know? So that's it. Like, we've set the stage now for this whole song to just shine. Like, let's go back to the beginning. Let's really hear this come in. Let's look at our bus compressor. So they're sitting nicely. This tells me we can add a little bit more kick energy out of there. Bit more snare sample. And I'm going to put that snare sample into that reverb as well, dial back a bit. Nice. That's just to marry the space of the sample and the space of the kit, because the samples have a good snare sample will have a room profile to it, and sending that room profile into that reverb really adds to its quality and marries those two things together. Tell me you can't bring guitars and vocals and all that into this and make a great song. And think about how many problems we started with the drums. One more time, let's bypass everything. And you can listen to where we started and where we are. I'll leave the reverbs on there. You're hearing weird clicking from the snare in the left ear because of the fucking toms not being gated and all this other shit. It's scruffy. I'm willing to bet if you received that and you're watching this video, you're trying to learn how to mix drums, you would say, man, how are we ever going to make that sound fucking... Like, it's how are we ever going to make that sound like it could be a record, right? Bringing all these little things in there. One, we swapped the kick because it was unusable in my opinion, and added a snare sample, some EQ, some framing, some reverb, and this is what you get. And there it is. How to mix drums that rock. Those drums fucking rock. I don't need you to tell me because I know I grew up listening to this kind of music. I love mixing this kind of shit. It's so fun. It's so dynamic. And there it is. Look how those drums come together. If I've been successful in this tutorial, then I'm guessing you think it's probably not as rocket science-y as you think it is to get from that start to that finish point. You can do it too. The principles are the same, but the decisions are yours. You can do it your way. You can choose the frequencies you like. You can choose the elements that you like, and you can apply the same principles based on what your ears and your expectations and your decision making says. But we're not done here. My plan with this series on how to mix drums that rock is going to become how to mix songs that rock. Next, we're going to dig into the same mix, and we're going to be looking at the bass guitar, and we're going to be looking at the electric guitar and how we can bring those elements together. I'm taking you through my entire process for mixing this song, piece by piece, section by section, episode by episode. Let's do it in installments. Let's take it piece by piece. It makes it easier for you to learn. It makes it easier for you to refer to, and it makes me not go crazy making a 2-hour video. So next up, bass guitar, electric guitars. Let's bring them in. Let's make it rock. I'll show you a couple of my little thought processes and tricks and different ideas that you can use and leverage into your song to make your guitars slap. See you then.